Chapter 7. Deep Down. Despite my disagreement, Zhao followed me into DU. We didn't get far before we came up to the barrier that prevents living souls from entering. I was surprised to see it still standing, but there was a fresh pair of tracks from the cart through the dirt, so I knew it had to have passed through. I put a hand to my chin and the other to the barrier, racking my brain for a way to break through. I heard Zhao ask from behind me, what are you doing? It distracted me, so I decided to explain it to him. This barrier prevents the living from passing through. I need to know how Lin Yu got by it if I'm going to confront her inside. Oh, that makes sense. Here, I'd bet this'll help, Zhao said, surprising me. He walked to the leftmost edge of the barrier, where he pointed to something so subtle I hadn't noticed it. There was a small yellow ball about the size of a pea that was touching the wall and the barrier, seemingly sitting between them, though creating no open space where I could wedge my hand in. Nonetheless, Zhao reached for it and simply batted it to his right. The ball quickly flew to the right side of the entrance, pushing the barrier along with it. I dashed to the other side of the entrance and crossed the barrier. Zhao was being foolish as usual, so I signaled to him to cross as well. He did so, but he did it so clumsily that he tripped and slammed down into the dirt on the other side. I sighed as I made sure his body was clear, and when I was sure it couldn't hurt him, I swatted the ball back the other way, closing the barrier once again. Zhao seemed surprised when I returned to the left edge of the entrance and snatched the ball from the barrier with a smile. He got up and dusted himself off before he started to speak, but we started walking deeper as he spoke. Taking that with us is smart. Unless they have another one, the living will be trapped inside DU. Exactly. I'm surprised you put that together, I said. He seemed to take offense and roll his eyes. We walked quietly a few moments toward the massive fortress that served as the underworld. The moans and screams of the damned were getting on my nerves, so I asked, "Hey, what is this yellow thing anyway?" "It's a prayer bead, a type of conduit, like a wand is for magic. It works for divine miracles and intervention. Pretty useful in my line of work," he remarked. "Really? It works with divine energy? So what could someone do with something like this?" I asked. "Well, it usually depends on the divine who blessed it, or what they blessed it with. Though the one we found seems more like one of the beads the master of my temple has. It's more for general manipulation of divine works," he explained. "Like how it was just sort of stuck in the barrier and used to open it?" "Interesting," I said. Zhao was about to reply, but we passed a small hill in the dead brown landscape, and it revealed the main entrance to the fortress. There were no guards out front, and the doors were wide open. It made me feel uneasy. Zhao gasped, "Huh? Where are Oxhead and Horseface?" as he ran up to the entrance. I jogged up along with him and asked, "The who now?" "Oxhead and Horseface, the guardians of the gates of DU," he decried. "Never mind them. I'm guessing they're supposed to be watching the door, so... Where's that Ming Song lady?" I asked myself, dashing ahead. Zhao called, "Hey, wait!" as I left him behind. So I called back, "Don't get yourself hurt this time!" And I didn't hear any response as I entered the prison of the dead. It was a quick dash through a long hallway, but only a moment after I entered, I spotted her. Lin Yu was standing strong with her blade drawn and bared over her head in a brutally offensive stance, her shining light obscuring the rest of the room from view. I saw my opportunity and drew my blade, dashing as fast as I could. From the hallway, I leaped straight at her, plunging my blade straight into her heart and ending this, once and for all. Or so I thought. She gasped and stumbled forward as her light dimmed and blood poured from her chest, but I was shocked when she looked back and locked eyes with me. "You!" she growled as blood dripped from her mouth. I used my foot and yanked my sword free of her chest, pushing her to her knees in the process. She immediately started getting to her feet. "I don't know how you're still standing, but no one gets up from this," I said, moving to decapitate her. She chuckled and blocked with her black blade, locking eyes with me once again. I heard crossbow bolts fire, but I was shocked when they didn't bounce off my skin like they had before. Their impact nearly knocked me aside, and I suddenly felt ill. Lin Yu got back to her feet and pressed a hand to her wound where my blade had pierced her chest just a few moments before, and I was shocked to find her wound had closed completely. Her light was starting to shine brightly again, but behind her I was able to see the group of men who shot me with their crossbows. They were reloading in front of their cart that was rocking back and forth violently from whatever was inside, and we were in a massive room that seemed like a great massive courtroom. And then I saw him. A massive deity or demon with huge horns and teeth, red skin, a surly wrinkled face, glowing yellow eyes, and a magnificent gray beard. He was so big his foot was the size of an estate. He was wearing a stately green robe and wielding a massive golden hammer. The room's defining feature was a giant balancing scale with one massive golden weighing cup on each side of the giant red judge in the center. My attention was taken by Lin Yu as her light flared up and she pointed her blade at me, a spiteful smile creeping across her lips. That poison will affect even you, Damon of Athens. If I were you, I'd run back to Sun Wukong and beg for his help. You're out of your depth. Why did you release Towdy from his prison? I demanded. She seemed downright taken aback. What? Towdy? Who the hell is Towdy? She asked. I warned you that taking the Book of Souls would have dire consequences, Ming Song, the giant red god said in a gruff, booming voice. You'll say anything to spare your life, Yang Wen. I'm going to kill you and end the cycle of death and rebirth. For the good of us all, Lin Yu asserted. She flourished her blade and immediately rushed in on the giant god of death. I was going to intervene, but I was already feeling ill from the poison and fell back against the wall. I let myself slide down as I tried to focus and pull out all the darts, but at some point everything went fuzzy. I was surprised when everything started coming back into focus not long after. I could hear the sounds of combat. Lin Yu shouted, "Fire!" And I heard a volley of bolts launch, making me flinch in my weakened state. I was surprised to feel someone touching my side, and my eyes bolted back open to see Zhao kneeling beside me, a golden light glowing from his hands. "Zhao?" I asked him deliriously, but he shushed me. I looked down to his hands and saw that not only was he healing me, but he had a small rosary of prayer beads wrapped around his hand, one of which was glowing bright yellow. I wasn't feeling ill anymore, so I started pushing myself to my feet, but he grabbed me by the shoulder and stopped me. I reluctantly stayed in place as the light faded from his prayer bead, but another one on the rosary started to glow. Zhao held out a hand and I felt something shift around me, like the air had gone completely still. Zhao smirked confidently before holding the same hand to himself, making a golden bubble of barely visible energy surround him completely. With that, he gave me a confident thumbs up, and I pushed myself to my feet. I took a second to gather my thoughts and take stock of the room. The soldiers all had their attention on Yan Wang. The giant red divine was struggling to block the heavy blows of Lin Yu's lengthy blade, and I could see clearly that he'd been pelted with the same bolts that had struck me just a few moments before. He looked woozy and was holding her back as best he could, dozens of bolts resting in his flesh and weakening him by the second. I knew there was no time to waste and involved myself quickly. As fast as I could, I intervened in the battle and managed to make Lin Yu back off for a moment. She flourished her blade with fury as she sneered, "How did you get up again?" "I'd be more worried about what's going to happen next if I were you," I growled, ready to have another chance at her. "You're the one who should be worried," she insisted before jumping out of the way and yelling, "Fire!" The soldiers fired a volley at me, and I was careful to deflect all the bolts that endangered me with my blade. But I was a bit surprised when I noticed that those that were near misses were bouncing right off. I smiled to myself, grateful for the gift that Zhao had given me. Lin Yu seemed to notice the barrier as well, growling, "The priest!" as Zhao tried sneaking closer around the edge of the room. "You should return whatever you took, Blade of Ming Song. I won't allow you to keep meddling in works so far beyond your comprehension," I said seriously, but it brought a smirk to her lips. "You think your little barrier turns the tables?" she asked snidely. I couldn't help but return her smirk. She moved so quickly she practically vanished, but I predicted she would appear on my left, since she was right-handed. Luckily I was right, and barely managed to block a powerful slash at my face. But I was so surprised by the sound of glass shattering that I hopped back to gain distance. As I landed, I noticed the barrier crumbling around me and drifting into the air like dust on the breeze. When my foot touched the ground, it was gone. "Fire!" she commanded. Luckily no one was behind me, so I just leaped out of the way with ease. At this point I'd had enough, so I dashed straight at Lin Yu and attacked. She blocked without issue, but I was surprised when she grabbed my cloak instead of slashing in retaliation. She headbutted me so hard she rang my bell before pulling me back and shouting, "Would you just piss off already?" Then she kicked me so hard in the chest that she shattered my ribcage and ripped my cloak as I went flying and smashed through the wall, landing in a heap on a pile of rubble just outside. I faintly heard Zhao call my name as footsteps started approaching, but as I yanked myself from the rubble, I heard Lin Yu order, "Capture him!" and her men ran up to Zhao with their crossbows. He promptly surrendered, and I don't really blame him. He was outmatched. I tried getting up again, but the pain in my chest was so great that I doubled over and shuddered in agony. All I could do was clutch at my chest and try not to breathe. When I finally looked up, I was just in time to see Lin Yu turning away from me, returning her attention to Yan Wang. I could only see the giant god's foot, propped upright like he was sitting or laying down. Lin Yu snapped her fingers and one of the soldiers rushed to her side. She simply said, "The jar," and the man dashed to the cart, quickly returning with a decorative blue jar with 2 wide handles and a lid resting on top. He set it down gently beside her and removed the lid. Then he set the lid down and went back to the cart, returning with a short length of iron chains. Once he was by her side once more, she pulled a brown scroll from her shawl and unfurled it before placing her hand directly in the center of a strange group of markings I couldn't really make out. Without warning, the scroll started glowing bright golden until its shining aura outshined Lin Yu's glowing light. Then the scroll flew directly to Yan Wang entirely of its own accord, literally rolling him up into the paper as the scroll rolled itself up once more. The scroll returned to Lin Yu's hand without any beckoning, but it was shaking even more violently than the cart was. She hesitated only a moment before stuffing the scroll into the jar and quickly moving her hand so the soldier could put on the lid. Then the two of them chained the lid to the jar so it couldn't be opened and locked it with a padlock and key. With another snap of her fingers, the soldier returned the jar to the cart. After that, she took stock of the situation, and after she ensured she had Zhao and her men, she then ordered them to start heading back toward the entrance. She looked my way and locked eyes with me, giving a look that clearly said, "If you try it again, I will kill you." But you know me, that was little more than a challenge. I immediately started to my feet, but I still couldn't get up yet. I stayed where I was, too pained to move. But when I looked back to Lin Yu, I saw her walking away with that smug-ass grin on her face, and that really pissed me off. I tried to use my anger to force myself up again, but it turns out I didn't have as much fury as I had broken bones. I don't know exactly how long I had to lay there with my face in the dirt, but I'd say it was around 10 minutes before I was finally able to get back up. I had to walk back to the entrance, but by the time I arrived, I felt good enough to run again. The barrier was closed as before, but I realized she might think I was trapped in Diyu and that Zhao had helped me inside. I smirked to myself as I pulled the prayer bead from my pocket and used it to leave Diyu without issue. When I arrived outside, I was shocked to find that the Ming Songs and their soldiers had simply left the villagers of Dongfu behind to fend for themselves in the forest, and they weren't looking good. As with the man with the near-melting face I described earlier, most had odd deformities mirroring decay. Many were simply wandering around aimlessly while the remaining few with their wits about them tried fruitlessly to organize them. Only one or two of them didn't seem to have any symptoms at all. I didn't like it, but I ran right through them, chasing after the tracks the cart had left through the forest. If I couldn't help those people directly, maybe dealing with the Ming Songs could reverse what they'd done. I ran for a few minutes before I could finally see them up ahead in the torchlight wielded by their men. I dashed up as quick as I could, readying my blade to deliver a devastating blow to Lin Yu as I leaped at her chest. But my blade was batted aside by Lin Yu, having drawn hers and turned so quickly it was like one instant she was facing forward as she walked, and the next she knocked my blade aside with unyielding rage. The look in her eyes was pure fury as I managed to land on the ground and hop back. She shouted, "You might have gotten me with that once, but I will not allow you to do it again." She pointed her blade at me and looked like she was about to say more, but she was interrupted by Li Yu firing a crossbow bolt at me. I deflected it, and he said, "You've done enough, Lin Yu. I'd like to settle our score from earlier," as he approached. He slung his crossbow to his hip and cracked his knuckles before drawing his glaive. She just turned and said, "Whatever, just make sure you kill him this time," before ordering our men to keep marching and continuing on. Li Yu chuckled at his sister's beckoning. I took a deep breath to center myself, ready to take advantage of the opportunity to fight him alone. The guy took his glaive into one hand and entered a wide stance like a bear about to pounce before leaping straight at me. I raised my sword and did a driving thrust at his chest, but he batted it aside with his glaive before punching me so hard in the face that I went rolling through the dirt. I managed to roll to my feet and dodge his follow-up attack, but he spun into a vicious blow to my stomach before kicking my sword right out of my hands and knocking me down. I started trying to stand up, but stopped when he pointed his glaive at my throat. I swallowed hard, not sure how I would make it out of this one. Li Yu only sneered at me. "You really were pitiful, you know?" he degraded. I was about to retort when he plunged the blade of his glaive into my throat and ripped it back out, filling my lungs and throat with my blood. I fell back from the shock, but my eyes went wide when he raised his glaive high. I put up my hands to stop him, but I only managed to flail as he drove it right into my heart. The burning agony in my chest was unbearable as I grasped at his blade's handle, but it was only another moment before everything went black.